secret strategy we can use as property investors to completely recycle our money and effectively buy property for free. And actually, this investment strategy has been around for decades, and investors have used it on some of the biggest property developments in the UK to get the most out of their capital and extend their wealth even further. Imagine being able to benefit from the growth of property without having to put any of your own money in to get those returns. Well, in this video, we're going to explain BRRR, exactly what it is and how you can use it to expand your portfolio to new levels, even if your capital is limited. Hey, it's Gary from Let Property, and we help thousands of landlords every year buy and sell their tenanted property through the sale of specialist buy-to-let property investments. I personally own a multiple seven-figure property portfolio, and I'm here today to help investors just like you on the path of becoming a successful hands-off property investor, just like me. BRRR stands for Buy, Refurbish, Rent, Refinance, and Repeat. In very simple terms, what does this mean? Well, we're effectively going to buy a property for cheap. We're going to add value to that property. We're going to rent that out, and then we're going to take the new market value or the end market value, the GDV in some case, which is gross development value, and we're going to go back to a bank and we're going to ask for more lending on that property to effectively refinance and pull all of our money out, and then we're going to repeat that process. That means instead of buying a property, adding value to it, and then flipping it to pull all of the money back out and basically sell it to somebody else, we can keep the property and still pull the money back out by getting lending from the bank so we can keep the property, let it grow in the long term, and still have the capital to go and do the next property. And what you'll actually notice is that some of the largest developments in the world, some of the biggest buildings, the biggest skyscrapers, this is really what they do at a high level. They will create these buildings, they'll put them up, they'll take all the construction costs, and the value that the property will be worth after it's constructed will be so much value added by creating that skyscraper that they will get a large bank or a large financial institution to put lending against that building. It basically is a capital loan, and then they'll effectively pull all their money back out so they can go and do the next one. And this is done at the very, very high levels, and it's very, very common. And it's now more and more common with standard buy-to-let investments for standard investors that are just looking to build a retirement portfolio. Most of the opportunity for this style of investing is done with old dilapidated buildings, empty properties, or in many cases with many of the properties we trade with, it's actually done commonly with tenanted properties that are already producing an income too. So BRRR allows us to pull all of our money out and get it to work for us better. And I'm going to give you an example right now of a property that I actually did a few years ago that was an amazing BRRR opportunity. So this property was in Kingsbridge Drive here in Glasgow, and I bought it for £75,000, and I took a buy-to-let mortgage on that property for £56,250. I spent £10,000 refurbishing that property, and I rented the property out for £750 per month. Now, my total all-in cost at this point was around £32,000 with the deposit, the refurbishment, and the legal and stamp duty costs that I incurred within that property investment. Now, with my property producing a great income and the value being lifted because of the value I added, I also had purchased the property at a pretty good price at the time too, because it was tenanted. I was effectively able to revalue that property at £115,000. So surveyor comes out, values the property at £115,000, and I was now able to get a 75% loan to value on the £115,000 value. And this resulted in a new loan from the bank at £86,250. My previous loan from the bank was £56,250, so there's a £30,000 difference between the old loan that I took out and the new loan that I took out, and that difference I actually get given back in cash. That means for my £32,000 in cost to purchase that property, I now get £30,000 back, effectively meaning that I only ever have outlaid at this point £2,000 out for the property that produces a rent of £750 per month. That means I can now take that £30,000 and do the same process again, and that's the repeating aspect of a BRRR strategy. So when you see all these videos online where people say, oh, I bought this property for a couple of grand and here's what it makes me per month, this is probably what they're doing. They're buying something, adding value to it, refinancing at that higher value from the value created, and then they're effectively using that money for the next purchase, and they're calculating the amount that was left in the deal at the very end of that opportunity. It doesn't mean you've genuinely bought a property for a couple of grand. What it means is that you've taken on more debt against the asset so that you have less skin in the game on that asset itself. Now, your brain may be wondering, what if I got the property revalued at higher than £115,000? Let's say it even jumped up to a crazy number like £140,000. Would I get more money off the bank than what I even put in originally? Well, the answer is yes. This is very rare to happen in the current market environments because you would need to effectively be buying property at 30 to 40% cheaper than it's actually worth, which is very difficult to do. But let's just say in that example, you could do that. This would be called an infinite return. Effectively means that you have more money back on the property. There's less money in the investment than you even put in, and effectively any return on top of that is just completely infinite because you've actually been paid additionally to what you originally put on the investment. And I have seen this happen, but in my own personal property investment career, I haven't been able to do this once, so it's not something that you're probably going to be able to plan around and do as a standard buy-to-let investor if you're buying properties in really good high demand area. And the only exception to that would be if you were adding really large amounts of value, i.e. you were actually constructing properties or adding massive extensions to properties. Most property investors that are trying to trade in the buy-to-let world and build a buy-to-let portfolio are not adding enough value to be able to get that kind of infinite return on a refinance, so they generally won't get it. But if you're adding extreme value and you're building buildings, there is abilities to be trying to do some of these infinite returns and actually take more capital back off the bank than you even put in the first place. Now, what's the downsides of using a BRRR strategy? Well, the first thing we need to consider is that generally that process that we're talking about of actually refinancing is going to take at least 6 months for you to be able to even do it. And this is just due to the UK legislation, anti-money laundering policies. For you to actually go in and do a refinance, there is a time frame you will need to wait. So that initial £32,000 in my example, I had to outlay that from day one, and I was only able to get that £30,000 back about 8 months later. The other thing you need to consider is the debt consequences. Back in 2008, the banks were offering 110% mortgages. It was an absolute crazy land. And people were taking on more debt against properties that effectively they were even worth. And when the market dropped in 2008, those properties dropped even further, and people were negative 30 to 40% down on their property investments because of this crazy lending that was happening at that time. You need to remember that more debt is more risk at the end of the day, and a BRRR strategy is effectively just increasing your debt, and you shouldn't discount that. So what you should be doing is you should be looking at your entire portfolio and weighing up whether you want to take high amounts of debt and at what level you want that to be at across the portfolio. The one good thing to consider is that currently in the UK, 75% is really the limit. So even if you were to refinance on the higher value, you're still only going to get 75% of that. And there's still a 25% buffer in the value within any of those property purchases, even at the new values that you're taking out. This obviously risks your downside to any potential future problems with debt or any markets going down. You're always going to have that buffer there to where you'll be able to take the consequences and still be able to clear the loan if you ever need to sell that property on at any point. So I hope this gave you a good rundown on what BRRR strategies work. So many of our clients and so many investors that I know use this strategy on a daily basis. I used it at the start of my investing career to really get ahead and get a good kickstart. And then a lot of the assets I bought now have been more cash purchases. But it's a great strategy for getting started if your capital constraint is low. If you're interested in finding out if now is the right time to invest, then click the link up here to check out my video on that topic.